Serializing. Are we ready for serializing? All right. Serializers. So by definition, well, by convention, we use the American spelling for serializers. All right. Cool. So, are we ready? From REST framework, import serializers. From .models, import, what was our model called again? Profile. You know what? While we're here, we should probably go from Django.contrib auth, not models, auth, import get user model, and we'll bring this get user model in again. Oh, actually, can I just go, let's do it that way. That makes sense. I've already imported user into models, so why not just import it directly from models? Save ourselves some double handling. I don't believe that's exactly how I do it, but let's give it a go. Cool. So with Django and with Django REST framework, most things are done in classes. I was telling you before about how everything's basically a helper meta class. And so the meta classes are going to interpret stuff. So we're going to call this thing profile serializer. And we're going to use serializers.model serializer. If you're using VS Code, which I assume pretty much everyone will be, if you've got your virtual environment set up, and it should do that by default, but just if it's not giving you autocomplete, then chances are it's your virtual environment's not set up. So most of these things should be auto-completing for you. Maybe not as much as mine is, because mine's getting a little bit too excited. But yeah, so that serializes model serializer should auto-complete. Tab is your friend. And inside our class profile serializer, we're going to create a class called meta with a capital M. Inside class meta, we're going to create a model called profile. And we're going to use fields equals double underscore all double underscore. Are we happy with that? Yeah? Then we're going to create a user serializer. So we're going to class user serializers. User serializer, sorry, is which extends from or inherits from serializers.model serializer again. We're going to create another class meta, and we're going to have model equals user. The minimum things you need for a model serializer is a model and fields. So you have to give fields. Fields doesn't always have to be it doesn't always have to be all. It can be iterable. I like to use tuples, but you could use a list if you wanted to of values. And so in this, I'm going to go fields. We're going to have ID. We're going to have username. We're going to have email, first name, last name, is staff, is super user. That sounds pretty good. Yeah. You don't have to put all of these in here, to be honest. If you just go ID, username, email, that's probably enough. I only put the rest in because my autocomplete suggested it and I'm lazy, so I said tab. I'm going to scroll up a little and show you what I imported, because that's probably more important. And I'm pretty sure that user's going to work, but it might not, we'll see. Yeah. So I've done one of two things. So in the first one, fields all, everything is going to show up. So every field that we define in the model will show up there. So this is an implicit way of referencing the fields in that serializer. So the serializer, remember before lunch I was saying the serializer is the way you interact with not so much the user, but the request. That's probably a better word, the request and response. So the way you interact with the client that's talking to you is through the serializer. The serializer takes the client's information or the client's submitted data and converts it into Python for you to work in, and then it takes your Python and converts it into JSON for them to use. So it's a backwards and forwards process. So if they're creating a new one, they'll use the same, well, they don't have to use the same one, but if you use, you can use it for bringing data in, or you can use it for sending data back, or you can use it for both. So fields all just means use them all. In this particular case, where we've got a bio, and we've got an age, and we've got, what else did I throw in there? Is that it? Can't remember. Anyway, got a couple of things. I know what's there, I don't care. All for me is nice shorthand because I'm going, well, I don't really, if I update the model, then maybe I probably just want it to come through automatically. If it's in the profile, we probably want to tell the front end that this is something they care about. Whereas when it comes to the user, the front end doesn't need to know the password hash. Like, it doesn't need that. No one needs that. So we're not going to put it in here. We're going to define these fields manually. So explicit definition, implicit definition. There is additionally another one that you can use instead of fields, which is called exclude. And exclude is the opposite. So exclude will give you everything except for what you say not to do. So rather than, it's a blacklist rather than whitelist way of looking at it. So rather than looking at it as we only want these ones, you go, these are the ones we don't want, and you can do everything else. So there's two ways. In fact, very likely that I'll turn this into an exclude if I don't waste time, or if I do waste time. Cool, are we ready? All right, since that isn't a change to the model, we don't need to migrate because it's just a serializer, but we do need to link this. And so we were talking before when I had the slides up, serializers are the way you interface with the request and the response, but the way you actually deal with that transaction is in the views. So we're going to have to write a view for this. There's a really good workshop bit of instruction from last year that you guys should get access to have a look. But I think for the interest of making this one really valuable, I'm going to sit with stuff that's sort of your more likely path, right? So we're going to go to views. And in our views, we're going to do some things. So we're going to import some stuff. We're going to say from rest underscore framework, import response with a capital R. Oh, sorry, it's rest framework dot response. Response, import response with a capital R from rest framework dot, no, not that. Views, import. So there's a thing called, we're going to go with API view. Let's do it that way. We'll import API view. Cool. And then I'm going to go class, profile, list. No, I'm going to call this user list. We're going to go user list is an API view. I'm going to create a method called get. And get is not going to do return hello world. All right, I'm going to go users equals user.objects.all. I need to import that. I'm also going to have to do that. That's from.models import user. I really hope that works because that'll save me some time if it does. Serializer, it's a bit cheeky. You're not really supposed to import something that was imported somewhere else. Oh no, it was defined, it'll be okay. And then I'm going to go serializer equals user serializer dot, and then open parenthesis, users and many equals true. And then I'm going to return a response object with serializer dot data. So there's a few things going on here. The users equals user object dot all. You guys should know what that means because we talked about that with when we're doing the interactive Python shell thing. So that's just user, database things, all of them. Pretty straightforward. The serializer is to get, I'm instancing or instantiating a user serializer. So our user serializer class, I'm giving it users, which is, so user serializer knows that the model is a user model. So we're giving it the request. So our request came from here. That's our query set. So we're passing a query set and we're saying many equals true because the serializer can be singular or it can be many. Many equals true just tells it you're meant to be a lot of them. So even if you get one, don't treat it as one. This is a list. And then we're returning response. Response comes from REST framework response. It's just a wrapper to make sure it adds all the special context to it. And serializer.data, because we want the data out of the serializer. We don't actually want the serializer itself because that's just a tool. We want the data from that tool. And that's what we're returning back. So this response to the data will return a JSON object. We're not going to look at it directly as a JSON object because we're going to use the web interface. REST framework gives us a web interface to look at it, just makes it a bit prettier. But if you were using Postman or Insomnia or curl or HTTP, which is actually a really cool shell terminal tool, to do this query, it would send you actual JSON back and forth. Cool. All right, we're ready. We want to have a look. We need to add it to our, we need to add it to our URLs actually. So in our user profile directory, I'm going to create a URLs Python file. And I'm trying to remember how the context of that's written. So let me check the one I wrote before. There's a few things you have to do here. I need from Django.urls import path. I need from dot import views. So that's from this directory, import the whole views file. And I'm going to create a app name user profiles, that's correct. User profile, singular. And then I'm going to create a URL patterns equals a blank route. So this is our user directory essentially. So /user, I suspect should be a list of users, is how I'd look at it. And then views userList.asView. So userList is our class. Django originally, when it was first built, was a function only. You could only write functional views. A functional view is like what we wrote for what you saw for the ping. The ping was a function that had, what was it like, health check or ping, and in brackets request, and returned the value. That was traditionally the only way you wrote Django handlers or Django views. So all Django class-based views will use an asView method to turn it into what Django is expecting the router to be. I suspect if they were to rewrite Django today, that .asView wouldn't be there, but you know, it is. Cool. All right, we need to do something else. So when you're ready, we have to open server.urls and tell it to connect up. So we good? All right, I'll get into the next bit for those that are ready. We're going into the server URLs, and we're going to go path, and we're going to say API/user, and we're going to include user profile URLs, pretty much exactly like that. Now, in theory, when that saves, it should allow us to, if you're not still running server, because you can just run server or auto restart. If you are running the Django server and you're using VS Code and your VS Code is set to autosave, it is highly likely that the reload process in the Django run, run server process will, because VS Code is very eager with how it saves very often, and quite often Django the Django server, when it's restarting for a change, will fail because the code's saved when it's not completed yet. And then by the time you finish writing the sentence, it'll saved before Django reached a state where it's ready to check if your file's saved again. So it won't actually see your final save. Just be careful of that one. Sometimes it'll hit an error, you just have to cancel out of it and get back in, if you're auto-saving. Cool, all right, we're ready to look. I'll take that as a yes. All right, let's have a look. We'll go to our web browser. We'll type HTTP. Well, you can link it. Make sure it's running. I didn't check if mine was running. Luckily, it is. And then we're going to go /API. And we're going to go /user. And we should have something looks like that. /API/user. So what you might notice is that from this big list, there is some sort of stuff that's missing. We could approach this one of two ways. So our profile data's not here, right? We've got a bio, we've got an age, but it's not showing up. We could create we've created another serializer. So we could create another view. Actually, let's do that. I'll show you a different way of doing views, and we'll give that a play with. All right, so I'm going to go back to views.py. You know how I was telling you all about how Django gives you lots of ways to shortcut things and do stuff more efficiently? We're going to go user profile list, and this time I'm going to use a list API view. Import generics. Down here I'm going to say generics.list API view. Just because you're probably going to use a few generics, so we'll figure this out. All right, so rather than defining the whole get that we just had to do, we're going to define two things. One is the query set, and the other one is the serializer class. We're not using serializer, the query set serializer. We're using the profile objects.all, and we're going to use the, what did I call my serializer for this? Profile serializer? Profile serializer. Profile serializer, and I should probably have called this profile list rather than user profile list. I mean, who cares? That's just a thing. It's complaining to me that profile is not a thing that it's aware of. That's because I haven't imported it. So I'm going to come up here and import profile from my models. I might get rid of a few bits of space in here. So what am I doing here? In this first one, I've used the API view meta class helper. And the API view is basically going, I'm going to understand how the request bit works, and you're just going to tell me what to do when I get a get type request, I'm going to do these steps. That's what this is doing. In this one, I'm abstracting even more. I'm using a generic list API view because I want a list. So it knows that it needs a list, and it says, well, the minimum things that I need for this are what data, where am I getting the data from? So profile objects all. And the second thing is, how am I going to serialize this? So I've got two things, serializer class, query set, and those two are the bare minimum for getting stuff on the screen. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go into our user profile URLs, and we're going to add a new thing. So I'm going to create another one of these. I'm just going to duplicate the line that I've already got rather than typing new stuff. And up the top, I'm going to go profile / and I'm going to change my user list to user profile list. And just to be sure it actually works, I'm just going to go user profile, and it does, so that's good. Do we think that our poor suffering front-end developers are going to be very happy with us giving them two different queries to get one user profile? No. So what would be really useful here is if we could take all of this information in our profile that we've created to make sure we don't violate the Django user class and move that into our singular user serializer. Yeah? Sound good? Right, that's good because it's really easy to do. So we're going to go back to our serializers, and we're going to do two things. The first of which is we are going to create an attribute above the class meta, so in the actual user serializer itself. This is how you define a custom field. And we're going to call this profile, which is a very important word. It's the name of the reference that we gave it's our reverse lookup essentially. And we're going to use profile serializer to do that work for us. And read only equals true. Well, we might want to change that, but that's a future problem. We're not going to deal with that right now. And we've added something here, so we're going to have to add that to our list of fields profile. So you have to have both this line and this. Oh, that's not working. That line and that line. Why? So profile is profile serializer. That's the serializer for the profile data. And profile is getting added here because it's a field we care about. Cool. All right, if you save that and you go back to your browser and you go to /users, I think it was users, whatever we called it, and you reload it, you should now have a nested profile within your user. You could get rid of the profile URL. However, it might be tricky if you're trying to update it. So that's we haven't dealt with changing them yet. So we might use it for that. The one that's, why is it this? Because that's what, you know, when we were doing the reverse lookups for the author to the, what was the term? The feedback. So feedback to author, it was the user, but from the user it was user feedback set. When it's a one-to-one, it doesn't put the set at the end, it just uses the name of the model. And so the name of the model is profile. So from the user, the profile attached, the profile model that links to that user model is just profile because it's a one-to-one. So it doesn't use a many-to-many manager. And so that's why profile, that's important. You could throw in things that aren't that and it would do, you could put custom fields in here if you wanted extra fields that you want to process that are additional to the ones that are in the database. But if you're dealing with the database, you have to use what the database calls it, what the model calls it. Oh yeah, which one? I'm going to set up the user profile to be editable. I'm going to use query set profile objects all. And I'm going to use the serializer, profile serializer. And then I'm going to link that in here in URLs. And from memory, I'm going to do it this way. Oh my God. And I'm going to change that to be, this is not user list. That's silly because it can't be the same. This is profile list. And I think this is going to be profile detail. What I'm going to do next, I'm going to smash out some talk of authentication. And we're probably going to get about that far, I think. Because authentication is probably one of the big things that you guys need to know about. Filtering, I think you guys can work out. Yeah, all right, let's talk this. So we're going to go to our, in our views, so if we go to user profile views, we're going to, wonder if I can just go directly into permissions classes. So in user list, I'm going to create a permissions class, classes, and I'm going to put in here permissions dot is authenticated. So we're only going to have authenticated people. I need to import from REST framework up the top. I need to import permissions next to generics for that to work because it needs to know that that's a thing. My browser is going to complain that I've used square brackets rather than round ones, but that's not a big deal. You can use whichever. But I'm just going to put that in there. Permissions classes is authenticated. So only authenticated people will be able to see this data. Does that make sense? Cool. That's our user list. For our user profile list, for our user profile detail, I'm going to change this one to be permissions classes. And I'm going to say permissions is authenticated as well. So I'm going to create a new file as well. You guys ready for this? Yep. I'm going to call this permissions. And I'm going to create what's called a permission class, essentially. So we're going to create a custom permission. So from REST framework permissions, I'm going to create a new class, and it's going to be is user or read only. Oh man, can't type today. And that's going to be extracted from base permission. And this thing's done a great job. It's added some extra stuff for me. And it has object permission. So has object permission is if I'm going to look at an object, I'm going to interpret this object and I'm going to see what's going on. it's going to have that the request is the request that's come through, the view is the view that's calling it, and the object is the database entity. So in this particular case, I'm going to go, I'm going to do something before this actually. This is Python stuff. So I'm going to go if object, or if is instance, object, and object is user, where user is from .models import. Oh, I can't do that. I'm going to have to go from Django contrib.auth import get user model, and I'm going to have to go user with capital U equals get user model, because in order to, I have to do it this way, because if I try and import from models, this is going to try and models will import this. So I'm going to have a circular dependency. So to avoid the circular dependency, I'm just going to do it this way. So if it is an instance of user, return request.user equals object, or actually the other way around. Let's go object equals request.user. So in this case, I'll put some little strings in here. If this is for the user object, check against logged in user, and otherwise check user field against logged in user. So I'm going to use this for two separate things. Anything that has a user field on it, which will directly reference our user object, I'm going to check that. And if it's the user directly, I'm going to use it for that. So this is something I'll be able to use twice. So what I'm trying to do here is the request is going to have a logged in user object. So Django is going to tell me who the user that's logged in is. And I'm going to say, hey Django, does the user you've told me equal the same thing as the database entry I'm using? If the object, which is the database entry, is a user itself, check to make sure that the logged in user is the same user, and if so, they can edit this. If it's not the same user, they can't edit it. The bottom one is if the object in the database is assigned to this user, so this user is the user associated with that object, the user can edit it. If it's not that user, they won't be able to. So I'm basically returning a true if it's the logged in user that belongs to these things, and a false if it's not. So we're going to use this as is user or read only. So we're going to read only these things. So I'm going to add that to my view. If I go back to view, my permission classes here is they have to be authenticated, and additionally is user or read only. And I'm going to have to from dot permissions import is user or read only. So that important line and this important line, and I'll try and again, this is like hot take live coded, so let's see if it works. It has been a long time since I've written Django REST framework, like 4 years, 3 years. So it might fail. If we reload our page, does it still work? It does. It tells us the authentication credentials were not provided. All right, everyone up to that? I'm going to go into my server URLs. And in my server URLs, underneath admin, I'm going to add path. And my path is API auth. And I'm going to include, I don't want that, include REST framework URLs for that one. Now, if you go back to your website, you should see a login button on your Django REST framework, which allows you to log in there. Just gives you a bit of extra bits and pieces. But what's more important than that is we need to probably set up auth for your front end, right? You're going to have your front end's going to have to authenticate against your server, right? Yeah, everyone agrees that that's the thing that's going to have to happen. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, with UV, I'm going to add a new package. We're going to add Django REST framework, all one word, dash simple JWT. I'm going to go into my settings for server settings, so in server, And I'm going to find the REST framework section, which hopefully exists. It doesn't. All right, cool. I'm going to say that the place it probably deserves to exist is above templates. So underneath root URL config and above templates, I'm going to go REST underscore framework, all capitals, equals open dictionary. So mustachio brackets. And I'm going to add a key for default authentication classes, all capital. And in there, I'm going to create a tuple that's going to have REST framework session authentication, which I think off the top of my head is the right one. We will find out. And I'm also going to add, oh, sorry, I should get rid of this yellow stuff. REST, quotes, REST framework underscore simple JWT dot authentication, JWT authentication. So what that's saying is that I'm going to keep the session authentication, and that was the thing that we were using before to log into admin, those sorts of things. I'm going to keep that, but more importantly, I'm going to add this new section, which is the JSON Web Tokens. Right, and then from there, if I don't know, what am I going to do? I'll cut this, I'll split this down and I'll leave it at the bottom so you can still read it. And then I'm going to go into my URLs, my project URLs, and right where I've got that API auth, I'm going to add some new ones, so path, because that's what we do, API / token, and that's going to point to token obtain pair view as view with the name token obtain pair, and I'm going to create another path which is going to be token refresh, which is token refresh view, not obtain pair, token refresh view as view, and that's I'm going to call that token underscore refresh. Does it work? That's the $1 million question. Let's find out. Run server. Well, that worked. Let's reload our page. Does that still work? Cool. All right, it's telling me that I've now got an API token, obtain token pair, method get not allowed. So this is giving me my, my form now, because we've added that value for validating against the user. We can now see it. I'm going to go admin, what was the password? Password 123, and I'm going to post that, and it's going to give me an access token. So this is what the Django REST framework web interface looks like, which is a helpful tool for showing you what it looks like. But that's not what we're really going to interact with. What we're going to be interacting with is going to be via the command line. So well, it's going to be the computer, like, front end's going to be doing it, right? So the front end's going to be doing it. I'm going to run this server. I'm going to open another browser window. I'm going to go UV. Actually, I won't. Let me just open a brand new one. And I'm going to go HTTP and that big long URL that I had. I'm going to try and run that. I'll zoom in, sorry. Is that better? So this is the request, right? That's a HTTP request. That's the response. Method not allowed. We're not allowed to do that. It's not allowed to be a get. All right, okay, cool. Well then, let's make that a post. All right, it's telling us that the username and password is required. So HTTP, IE, is a really great command line tool that helps you talk to stuff. So it's going to give me this big long access key. I'm going to take that big long access key. I'm going to copy that into an environment variable. I'm going to call this token, or let's say demo token equals that big long thing. And now I can go echo demo token, and it'll give me that. So I'm going to try and do something that we can't. So what APIs was I no longer able to touch? Were user detail. Do I have a user detail section? Is that what it was? We're getting a response, which is, that's the HTML response. I need to do a JSON thing. To pass that through, I'm going to have to pass a header. And to pass a header from memory, headers, where are you? HTTP headers, user agent, colon, so it's a colon. So I'm going to go authentication, colon, bearer, and I'm going to go, what do I call this, demo token, to bring in my environment variable. It's not authentication, it's authorization, that's what it is. Authorization with Z. There we go. So now this query's got access because it's authenticated. The authentication I used was this get. So your process is your front end will hit this endpoint. It will provide the details needed in a JSON body. You'll get that token back. That token the front end will store, and you'll pass that as your header of your authorization header. So if I do a -v on this, you'll see up here that this is the request at the top and the response at the bottom. So it's a get API user, that authorization header, and that's the thing that Django will use to figure out what it is and who you are, whether or not you have access. Thank you very much for a marathon effort. It has been a very long time to get to this point. I appreciate it. We've struck a lot into a very small session. I'm hoping that this will be enough to kind of get you going and pointing the right direction. Two things I would leave you with are Django docs, Django REST framework docs are really good too. Go REST framework. The documentation here is really great. Their tutorial's really good. The other thing is cdrf.co. This website is really amazing for figuring out how the model serializers work, list serializers. You can go through this and understand how all the bits and pieces work. It's probably a little bit more on the, as you're getting more into it, more customizing things. Django, the Django REST framework tutorials really will outline how all the bits and pieces glue together. That's probably about it. Any final questions, or you're all just burnt out now?